Today, we're going to talk about an operating system that didn't just power a phone. Nope, it completely changed how we interact with technology itself. This is the story of Apple's iOS.
So it all kicked off with this one big choice back in 2005. As Apple started dreaming up the iPhone, Steve Jobs found himself at a crossroads. And what did he do? He pitted two of his best teams against each other, the Mac team and the iPod team. The challenge was simple: create the software for a phone that would change everything.
And in the end, they went with the epic feat. The Mac team's vision to shrink down their powerful desktop OS won. And that single decision right there set the stage for literally everything that came next. They weren't just making a bigger iPod, they were building a real, honest-to-goodness computer that would fit in your pocket.
Okay, so let's dig into that origin story. How in the world did they actually pull off that epic feat of engineering?
So what is iOS really? Well, at its heart, it's a mobile operating system that came directly from macOS. And that's the key. It means from day one, it was built on this super solid, powerful foundation. You know, when they first showed it to the world, it wasn't even called iOS. It was just iPhone OS.
Now, what's just wild about this timeline is how fast it all went down. The internal showdown starts in 2005. Just 2 years later, Steve Jobs is up on the Macworld stage, famously saying the iPhone runs OS X and desktop-class applications. And then, just a few months after that, boom, it was in our hands.
The device itself was a game changer, for sure. But you know, there was this one decision about software that would literally define its future and kickstart an entirely new economy.
And this is going to sound crazy, but the original plan was no native apps at all. Jobs really believed developers should just build web apps that you'd access through the Safari browser. But developers, they pushed back hard. They wanted to build real, powerful applications. And to their credit, Apple listened. They did a complete 180 and announced a native SDK was on the way.
And this is the moment everything changed. The App Store goes live with just 500 apps. I know, it sounds tiny now, but that was the spark that lit the fuse on the whole mobile app explosion.
And the growth that came next was just staggering. I mean, it starts here with a pretty modest 500 apps at launch.
But then, in just about a year, it explodes to over 100,000.
By 2013, it smashes through the 1 million mark.
And today, with well over 3.8 million apps and hundreds of billions of downloads, that one single pivot created a software ecosystem that the world had just never seen before.
So, okay, apps aside, what was it about just using an iPhone that felt so new, so intuitive? Well, it really boiled down to a few core design ideas.
So the whole interface was built on this idea of direct manipulation. You weren't clicking through menus. You were literally touching the thing you wanted to change. Multi-touch gestures like pinch to zoom. I mean, that felt like actual magic. And in those early versions, they used a design style called skeuomorphism, which made digital stuff look like real-world things, you know, like the yellow legal pad in the Notes app. It just made everything feel instantly familiar.
And this right here, this is a perfect example of how the OS grew up over time. Early on, a huge knock against it was no multitasking. You couldn't, say, stream music while you were browsing the web. But Apple added it step by step, starting with just a few background tasks in iOS 4 and eventually getting to the smart, full multitasking we know today.
And then, with the iPhone 4S, Apple added a whole new layer to the experience: Siri. By baking a voice assistant right into the OS, they took this sci-fi idea of talking to your phone and made it completely mainstream.
But all of this careful control, this curated experience, it comes with a pretty big trade-off. And that brings us to one of the biggest, longest-running debates in all of tech. This is really the core question when you talk about the iOS experience. Apple keeps a super tight grip on both the hardware and the software. So is that a good thing, or is it a limitation?
Okay, so on the one hand, you've got some serious pros. Apps are sandboxed, which basically means they're kept in their own little boxes, isolated from each other and the main OS. That's great for security, plus vetting every app means higher quality. But on the other hand, critics point to all the restrictions. Things like DRM can lock your music or movies to Apple's platform, and that centralized control led to a whole community of users jailbreaking their phones just to get around the rules.
And what's so incredible is that, despite this whole debate, that walled garden model has scaled into an absolute global force, powering billions and billions of devices.
And you gotta remember, it's not just for the iPhone anymore. The original iOS is now the bedrock for a whole family of operating systems, each one tweaked for its device. iPadOS for tablets, watchOS for wearables, and tvOS for your living room. Now, if you look at the global market share, yeah, Android is the big one, no question. But that 27% for iOS, that is not a small number. We're talking about a massive user base of over 2 billion active devices. That makes it one of the most important tech platforms on the entire planet.
And Apple keeps making these really bold, kind of forward-thinking moves. Like in 2017 with iOS 11, it made this huge technical jump and just cut off all support for older 32-bit apps and chips. It was a tough move, but it forced the entire ecosystem to move forward, paving the way for better performance and security.
So think about it. It all started with a choice: shrink the Mac or grow the iPod. From that, iOS has become this force that shapes how we communicate, work, and even play. It defined the smartphone and built entire industries out of thin air. So that leaves us with one final, pretty big question. With that kind of power, what is Apple's responsibility in shaping our digital world of tomorrow?